Hi, I'm Gary, and welcome to the galley. In the galley today, I am making corned beef and cabbage. And what I love best with corned beef and cabbage is Guinness Brown Bread. This brown bread is tender and soft, and just has that beautiful brown bread taste to it. So delicious. Now, a lot of people like that Irish soda bread, but for me and your corned beef and cabbage, it's the Guinness Brown Bread with some butter on it. It's delicious. So, if you're ready, let's make some Guinness brown bread. You're going to be glad you did. The first thing I did was set my oven temperature on 450 degrees to let my oven preheat. In this pan, I melted 5 tablespoons of butter, and then I want that to cool down so it's not hot because this is also going to go into our wet ingredients. But I'm going to use part of that to get my bread pan ready. And then we're going to do our dry ingredients next. And my dry ingredients, I'm going to do 1 cup of oats, and I'm doing old-fashioned oats, not instant oats. And this bread recipe calls for whole wheat flour. And I always carry a little whole wheat flour because every once in a while I'll get in the mood to make sourdough starter. And I like to use a little whole wheat flour in my sourdough starter. So I'm going to do 2 and 1/4 cup of whole wheat flour. And then just of my all-purpose flour, I only want 1/4 cup. And then we want our baking powder. And we're going to go 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And 1 teaspoon of, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1 teaspoon baking soda. I kind of said that backwards. 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. And I want to give this a whisk to make all of this combine. And when I whisk it, I want to leave a well in the center because I'm going to pour my wet batter into the center for when we're ready to mix it all together. For my wet ingredients, I have a can of Guinness. Now, you really only need 12 ounces, so if you have the bottle, you're better off. This is 14 ounces. And I don't want my bread to be too wet, so I'm going to leave about 1 ounce in that can. And then we're going to go with 1 cup of buttermilk. And I set my buttermilk out a while ago so it would come up to room temperature. My 5 tablespoons, what's left of my 5 tablespoons of butter. And then molasses. I just love molasses. I'm going to do a whole tablespoon of molasses. And I'm going to do my brown sugar in here because I want to make sure it gets dissolved. And I did 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And then I think I'm going to finish off this bottle of vanilla with 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And I just want to whisk this to make sure I get that brown sugar dissolved and that molasses incorporated. In case I didn't mention it, make sure that your Guinness is at room temperature. and not a cold one straight from the fridge. So now that I have this nice and combined, I'm going to pour this right into the center of my dry ingredients. And we want to go quick with this. Once we mix it, we want to go quick into our pan and quick into our oven. So give this a mix to combine. Once it's combined, you don't need to overmix it, just make sure it's combined into my loaf pan. And you can see it's already working. It's already starting to react. All of those chemicals are reacting to each other. So before we lose any of that goodness, we want to go straight into the oven. And I just like to make sure it sits in there well. 450. As soon as it goes in the oven, I'm going to immediately turn my oven down to 400 degrees. Once in the oven, I drop my temperature to 400 degrees. I'm going to go 45 minutes, but I am going to check it about 38 minutes just to make sure it's not baking faster than I'm anticipating. And in the meantime, I'm getting my Irish butter out of the fridge so that it can come up to room temperature, because this bread deserves some Irish butter. So we're at the 40-minute mark, and I think she's done. And I definitely think she's done. She did kind of come over the sides a little bit. You can see that. So we had a bit of a explosion. So because of that, I want to cut around the edges so that I can pop it out cleanly without tearing it. So I'm just going to run my knife around the edges. Make sure she separates. So I think I got the edges cleaned up. And now for the moment of truth, I'm going to give it a flip. Oh, and hooray, it's all one piece. Now, the unfortunate part is we have to let it cool down before we can taste it. But I might taste one of these crumbs. Very good. As soon as she's cooled down enough to cut into and have a taste, we'll be back. And while you're waiting, you can hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell and give me a thumbs up. Appreciate it. All right. So that was way too big a bite. This is so good. It tastes like what brown bread should taste like. It has that brown bread taste. It's not bitter from the Guinness. It's not overly sweet from the brown sugar or the molasses. It just tastes delicious, and it's going to be so perfect with our corned beef and cabbage. So you should try this year with your corned beef and cabbage some of our Guinness brown bread. You're going to be glad you did. It's delicious. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I hope you make this bread. Leave a comment if you do and tell me how it turns out. And if you haven't subscribed, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, safe cruising.